too.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Okay, Susan, I'm
That's
sorry.
amazing.
So,
Okay, it's, this is
So
fine.
don't even know where we left off, but I'll just
If you just
go.
want to start again.
The whole thing?
Well,
No, we don't start the
whatever,
whole
I
thing.
mean, it wasn't
So
very far into it.
it's for anybody who has lost somebody in the last 2 years.
any family or friend caregiver who has had somebody die in the last 2 years. And the first appeal is out to anybody in Montgomery County or some association in Montgomery County. Most of our retreatants are from Montgomery County. There are some that are not. You know?
And what is it about being a caregiver that deserves this type of attention?
Well, I think often people have stopped their lives to become a caregiver. Sometimes they are juggling a full work and family and everything else while they're also caregiving. And I think acknowledgement is a big thing, just like acknowledging grief is a big thing. And when people call to register for this retreat, we often spend a long time on the phone, and I said, tell me about it. What was it like? And you can almost hear them go, you mean you really care? Both the ups and the downs. And certainly when you have people who, their spouse, the person they've been with for 60 years or 50 years or 40 years or 12 years, but they were like that, all of a sudden that person isn't there. They don't know quite who they are. So sometimes we talk about being partners in life with whoever it is that you run into, and then becoming maybe care partners as you look at, you've gotten a diagnosis, what are we going to do, planning ahead, and then ultimately caregivers. So that happens, and we think, oh yeah, I can do it, I can juggle everything, but we don't realize what it's putting on ourselves. And sometimes being acknowledged for what we've been through or what we're going through is huge.
Talk about the significance of the vest. What is that activity designed to do?
It really is designed to often start a discussion about grief, about losses and grief, and how loss happens and grief is a natural balance of that loss in some ways, and that there are lots of emotions that come up. And people assume that, oh yes, they should be sad, but sometimes they don't think about anger. And they don't think about what kind of anger shows up. That person was really angry at me, and somebody said that in this group, and I think to be able to say, do you think you might have been the only safe person that they could be angry with? It puts it in a different perspective, because it makes it less about the fact that they lashed out at me and more about the situation that they're going through. So it's different each time and with each group. And the emotions that we bring up here are some of the ones that got talked about a little bit as we did our Wall of Remembrance and some of our activities yesterday. And there are also ones that certainly came out during the stories.
And you had Savea, I think that's how you say her name. You had her try on the
Saida,
try on the vest. When somebody's wearing that vest and then you pass it along to somebody else, what's the reaction that you usually see?
Well, I think the biggest thing is people kind of get the fact that as soon as somebody dies in your life, life as it was is no longer, and that's what the vest itself signifies. That's really to remind you that life as it was is no longer, and guess what? It'll never be the same. So ultimately, we may have many layers of that vest that we're wearing because we've had lots of people die in our life, and with each one comes different emotions that'll show up at different times. Sometimes way down the road, or something happens in the community and it reminds us of how we felt then, and so those emotions pile back on. And sometimes people don't realize how heavy wearing all those emotions is. The way we do it with the sand vest is these 1 pound bags of sand. We use this a lot in our Good Grief Clubs for the older kids, and we used to when we did health classes in Montgomery County schools on loss and grief. And it shows how heavy it is and how to realize that those people that are grieving are really carrying quite a burden, and that it is weighing them down. So for the caregivers, it's for them to realize, ooh, yeah, this feels really heavy and it really has weighed me down. And there are some times when maybe something can lighten it for the moment. Yeah.
That's powerful. And then the peacock feather, boy, that was just amazing to me, how they were so receptive to that. And, you know, you might think that they'd feel like, oh, I can't do this, I can't balance this peacock feather, but so many of them did. And what are you trying to teach them through that?
A little lightness of being. You know, we've lightened the load and showing some ways you can lighten the load with the Grief Fest by figuring out some healthy ways to nurture yourself. And the peacock feather is about, okay, how do we find balance in our life? And it's just to remind you, and it's an exercise. Again, we don't always use it with the Grief Fest, but it's an exercise. I said, okay, at that moment, let's lighten it up a little bit, but let's also think about the balance, because that's what we're going to continue to talk about today. One of the things that we're continuing with in after lunch is the healing power of nature, really, and talking a little bit about I'll call it the ancient wisdom traditions that really talk about the 5 seasons and the 5 seasons that exist within us in every decision and everything else. And of course, you look outside at fall now, and it's the time of letting go. So what are the things that I want to let go of, that I choose to let go of, so that I can go into winter, which is a time of deep knowing and going inside and reflecting and hibernating in a way, you know, looking at what I need, so that then spring can eventually come out with new birth and new growth and maybe some new ideas and some new ways of being. And then you go into summer, where it might be fire and joy and, you know, a little more frivolity, balancing peacock feathers, I don't know. And then late summer, which is the time of harvest, sort of reflecting on what all this has meant. Where am I now? What is it? And then you go into fall again, of letting go. And those are sort of the seasons of our life in some ways. And so that's part of what we'll do. We're actually going to start that part with the reading of a children's book, The Fall of Freddie the Leaf. And I think it'll be powerful for them.
And so when they leave here, you know, you're giving them these tools, you know, that they have tools for their toolbox to deal with this issue. What do you hope, you know, is the biggest takeaway for them when they leave here when the weekend's over?
So it's really about refreshing and renewing and recognizing. And the biggest thing that I hope that they take away is that they're not alone. We're building this support system of trust, and these are people they didn't know before. You know, and they are, I mean, how they're trusting each other with their story, with their raw emotions, with what is showing up is huge. We'll also give them a number of resources that they can use, and then I think down the line, we'll have a reunion of this group and just check in with everybody, see how we're doing. But I have people who did it last year who contact me fairly rarely about, you know, I went to a sad point or whatever was going on, and all of a sudden I pulled out my vision board that I did, and it reminded me of what's really important for me now. It's honoring themselves. Caregivers are not practiced at honoring themselves. We think that's selfish somehow, or we shouldn't be doing that. You know, the shoulda, coulda, woulda sisters creep in and haunt us all the time. And so it really is about, how do I take care of myself? And what I said to them a few minutes ago was, again, that reminder that if we honor ourselves, then we can give permission to those around us, family members and others that may be worried about us, to also take care of themselves. And that, I think, is one of the biggest gifts we can give. So the fact that they're not alone, that their presence matters, and that they will continue to have shifts in whatever way that shows up, in whatever timeline.
That's great. Thank you, Anne. Wow, powerful stuff. Really, really good. And I see they're journaling too. That's good.
They are journaling,
Yeah.
and the journaling, oh my God, they've been sharing this stuff. Debbie has been leading us in the journaling with some really poignant things, you know, that have been said, and
Sometimes when you write it, it's different than when you say it, isn't it? It's different when you write, I think.
last night we had pictures set up on those two tables, and they were to go and pick out two pictures that spoke to them. And one man that spoke said, I picked this picture, and I'm not sure why, and I picked this picture. And then he said, I started writing and I realized why. He said, I realized, and you should get his story. I think you probably enjoy getting his story. It's somebody whose wife has died, a young wife, and she said, she and I used to love to kayak, and this picture was of water, and then he told some instance of that. And then one of the things that always sort of appeared anywhere we were, as at special moments, was a ladybug. And so here, there's a picture with just a ladybug on it, and so I picked it. No, and it's just, but he hadn't realized why he was drawn to that until he started sharing it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So lots of different reasons. One of the biggest challenges is to get people so they're not comparing their grief. And to realize that my wife of whatever died, you know, somebody's talking about their wife of 40 or 50 years who died, and somebody's mother died. Well, she was old. Well, you know, it doesn't matter. We're honoring everybody's grief wherever it is. And if you were a caregiver, it doesn't matter who you were the caregiver for. I mean, it mattered to them, obviously, but it doesn't matter as far as this. We're about honoring our role as caregivers and what went on in that, and how did we get in that role? What was the expectation? What were our personal obstacles or our obstacles? And what am I doing now that I'm not a caregiver? One of our sessions last night started with triads over 3 words. Let's see if I can remember them. Responsibility. Yeah.
That's okay.
I'll look at my list. But what came out of that discussion was amazing. It was
Yeah.
responsibility. It ended with resiliency. I can't remember the third one right now, but that's just
That's okay.
where I am.
Yeah,
So that
that's
was pretty
okay.
cool.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
So we designed this to be presented last year for the first time, and we had 14 participants last year. We have 18 this year.
And the youngest is 32, you said?
The youngest is 32, and the oldest 2 are 84.
Yeah, we talked to June. She actually said she was 85.
Oh, she turned 85 before I... Sorry. Okay, she's 85.
Yeah, that's a big, and like you said, that's different losses in
Yeah.
life and different stages in your life
Yeah.
when those losses occur.
And kinds of losses. The youngest is Christian, who's 32, who has lost both his father and his sister most recently.